Hello, I'm the Nostalgia Cop. I reviewed so you don't have to. And I actually got shocked earlier, and I felt like doing this video because, well, someone that I work with also has a YouTube channel under the name Shadow Critias. Well, I just finished watching his review of Fly Me to the Moon, which was a manga that turned into an anime. In Japanese, it's actually called Tonikaku Kawaii. I've seen it myself, and I will say this, I really hope they make a season 2 of that anime. But in order for me to fully watch it again, I need to have Crunchyroll Premium, which sucks. Anyways, I do apologize if the audio isn't up to par, if it's crappy, but I wanted to do this mainly because he made some good points, and I wanted to give my thoughts on it. So, this is nothing towards you, Shadow Critias. This is just me. It's what I do. And I'm also gonna point out some stuff that Shadow Critias did, but in a better light. And I'm gonna start it out plain and simple. Because in the very first episode, yeah, that's the only time blood is seen, but we're introduced to Nasa Yuzuki. In the Japanese version of the anime, it's Yuzuki Nasa. He's just a boy, he's going through school, but people always ask him if he wants to be an astronaut. Because his name is Nasa. Which, as most people can figure out, is here in the US. They're saying NASA. You heard me. NASA. As in the United States project under, well, I'm not sure if it's a project, but NASA is an acronym for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And nowadays they work hand in hand with the United States Air Force and the United States Space Force, surprisingly, in order to send people up into space. Literally fly them to the moon. Oh dear God, is that why they called it that in the... Is that why they named the English version of Tonikaku Kawaii Fly Me to the Moon? Is that seriously why? Come on! I digress. Anyways, right now there's just one problem. In the first episode, Nasa almost dies. He almost dies, but as Shadow Critias said, he gets up and takes it like a fucking champ. But he did that to try and go after the secondary main character, Tsukasa, who saved his life by jumping in front of that truck with him. And they actually made a reference to a well-known Japanese poem. Well, a well-known Japanese story. Mythical folklore, if you will. Anyways. So, among all that, I'm actually surprised that it got interesting to me. I don't know why. But anyways, there is a sort of a romance element into it. And I apologize if some of the audio cuts out for some reason. I keep getting phone calls. Anyways, where was I? Now I remember. It actually surprises me that it's a slice of life type of anime. I mean, with the name Fly Me to the Moon in English, you'd think, oh, hey, maybe it's about space. But no, it's not. It's not about space. It's just... Well, there's one thing in the anime that I know for a fact people always mistake. And that's... well... NASA. They keep saying he wants to be an astronaut because his name is NASA, which is a United States-based company that sends people into space. But that's not it. In the anime, it's clearly stated that his name is written out as the kanji for starry sky. That's actually fucking deep. But I digress. First episode of the anime, we're introduced to Nasa and Tsukasa. Well, Nasa isn't paying attention to where he's going, walks across the street, almost gets hit by a fucking truck. Tsukasa gets hit too, however. But Nasa ended up getting the brunt of it for some reason. But he was slowly dying, and out of nowhere, he remembers that girl, remembers the Japanese folklore story, gets up and chases after her, which she finds at a bus stop. Finds her at a bus stop, they have a short conversation, can't remember what about, but he passes out, she goes to leave, he gets up again, chases after her, which shocks the hell out of her, and he flat out says to her, and I think I'm quoting here, but I'm not sure, I know we just met, but you are one of the prettiest girls I've ever seen, and I would like to take you out on a date. Which causes Tsukasa to blush, turn around, and tell him, and I quote here, I know I'm quoting this, I'll date you, but only if you marry me. Which Nasa accepts, and at that point, he falls down, passes out, wakes up in the hospital, goes on through to his everyday life, and suddenly, someone comes to his doorstep. He opens it up, and it's Tsukasa! With a paper that flat out says, well, it's a marriage license. Which means, well, the marriage license in Japan works a bit differently than in the US. Because in the anime, you fill that paper out and you take it down to the ward office, in which they go up and, lo and behold, you give them the paper, they get it filed, and congratulations, you're married! So, there's no real big ceremony or wedding or anything. That's where things get complicated here in America. Because in order for the marriage to be valid in America, you need to do that, but you also need to go through a wedding. And they reference this in the anime too. because we're introduced to characters who run a hot spring. Well, they run a bathhouse. And one of them asks Nasa, so when's the wedding? And the ones who run the bathhouse say, well, the ones who run the bathhouse, they're all women. All of them. One of them even has the density of Ash Ketchum and thinks, because in the episode, they've already gone to the ward office, they're already living together, they're already married, basically. And Tsukasa introduces herself to one of the workers, who just so happens to be one of Nasa's childhood friends. But uses Nasa's last name, Yuzuki. She introduces herself as Yuzuki Tsukasa. Because in Japan, people always introduce themselves by their last name first. Even in the animes, they always do that. For example, in the Sword Art Online anime, which a lot of people says is shit, but I like it. Anyways, in the Sword Art Online anime, whenever Asuna and Kirito finally introduce themselves, they meet up in real life for the first time. They introduce themselves. Kirito introduces himself as Kirigaya Kazuto. Asuna in turn addresses herself as Yuki Asuna. It's like that in Japan too. If you were in Japan, you were talking to someone, and you asked them to introduce themselves, they would introduce themselves by their last name first. So, for all you Pokemon fans out there who might be watching, if you see Satoshi Tajiri, the very creator of Pokemon, face to face, you thought he looked familiar, but you didn't know it was him, and you asked him to introduce himself in his native language, he would introduce himself as Tajiri Satoshi. That's how it is, because in Japan, you only address someone by their first name if they're either a close friend, a relative, or their significant other. If you just meet them for the first time, it's seen as disrespectful to address them by their first name, unless you don't know their last name. And that's actually referenced inside Tonikaku Kawaii as well. Because whenever inside the anime, even though they're married, they still need privacy because they're not comfortable around each other. I mean, they just got married. They haven't really known each other all that long. They just got married. Love at first sight, apparently. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. Love at first sight. They finally referenced that in another anime other than fucking Sword Art Online. Because it was pretty blatantly fucking obvious in Sword Art Online that Asuna had feelings for Kirito, they just didn't want to admit it. Until later. This is not going to end well. I believe it. But in reality, it makes a lot of sense. Because they don't really know much about each other, so of course they're not going to be comfortable around each other. However, Nasa's freaking out because Tsukasa's starting to undress and redress in her pajamas in front of him, and he freaks out and calls her Ms. Tsukasa. And that's when they go into giving each other nicknames and all that. Anyways, something I need to point out is the backstory of Tsukasa. We don't really know much about her. But apparently, in the anime, there's a mansion where she lived at. Inside that mansion is an actual fucking moon rock. An actual moon rock, which NASA apparently got interested in. He was being chased around, and automatically, whenever that glass breaks, they start freaking out. NASA jumps into action and makes sure that rock stays where it is. But Tsukasa never really said anything about her life. We don't really know anything about Tsukasa's life. And I doubt we ever will. Because Tsukasa is a woman shrouded in mystery. Sound familiar? A character surrounded in mystery ends up being the love interest of one of the main characters. Sound fucking familiar? Ugh. Anyways. So, I actually saw all of Tonikaku Kawaii on Crunchyroll when I had Crunchyroll Premium. And honestly, I liked it. Normally, I look at things through a law enforcement perspective whenever I watch shows, but with that show, I didn't look at it through a law enforcement perspective. Because with me being married, I looked at that through a married person's perspective. And a lot of it made sense. I mean, take it from me. A guy who literally posted his wedding on his channel. I wanted to do a review of this anime for a while now, but I just never really had the time for it. Until now. Anyways, so eventually, at some point, if you're married, you think deep down, oh my dear God almighty, something is going to happen, and it's not going to end well. I don't know how to deal with something like this. For that, that's why I turn to anime. I turn to anime to help me with that. And when I came across Tonikaku Kawaii, it actually helped me realize that a lot of things married couples like to do, my wife and I don't do. And that's mainly because we can't really afford to do much. But even then, it's just not interesting to us. It's not interesting to us to go to one place, spend the day there, and just go back home to boredom. And with me working, my wife also works. With me doing all this and looking at everything, it puts a lot of stress on you. Yeah, sorry if something went wrong with the camera. I keep getting notifications and I'm clearing them, so. Anyways. When I look at Tonikaku Kawaii, when I look at Nasa and Tsukasa's relationship, I immediately think of me and my wife. Because I would do anything for her. I would want to make her the happiest girl in the world, or at least try to. And I do that. But in doing that, I also need to try and find a way to make myself happy as well. Otherwise, it's gonna be like we're just platonic roommates. And I love my wife to death. I would give my life for her in a heartbeat. Again, sorry if the camera is messing up. Damn notifications. Anyways. So, I want to do an in-depth view of every episode of Tonikaku Kawaii, but I can't. Because I don't have the proper equipment, and I don't want to get copyright claimed. Regardless, I'm glad that Shadow Critias did that review. I'm glad I saw it, because the way that Nasa acted towards Tsukasa in the very beginning, the way he was determined to get to her, talk to her, find out more about her, spend time with her, and ask her to date him, it told me, holy crap, he really has feelings for this girl. She must be a keeper. And that's something that I think of my wife. I see her as everything to me. To me, she's a keeper. Anyways, that's all the time I have for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, ring that bell to stay notified. If I could do any annotations, I tell you to click on to see what other videos I've done. And if I'm working on a big project, I'd leave it in the description below so you'd see what I'm working on. And blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. I'm just doing this as a hobby, people. Okay? Cut me some slack if I don't have a good outro or a good intro. But I do want to give a shout out to Shadow Critias for not only inspiring me to do this video, but also for helping me get an idea of what to say for this video. And Shadow Critias also has another thing that I've been trying to do. He has an origin story for one of his characters for Boku no Hero Academia, also known in English as My Hero Academia. So don't get it confused with the forbidden anime. I swear that became the biggest meme. Whatever. Sure. Sorry. Anyways, I plan on doing an origin story for my OC for that series as well, but it's going to take some time. Anyways, once again, thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, NC